My name's Nick. I'm one of the pastors here. We are continuing our series in Matthew, the King and His Kingdom. And last week, we know that Jesus was challenged by the Pharisees. And Jesus then takes His disciples and He puts them on a boat. And before they get on the boat, they are about to get onto the boat. And Jesus says to them, "Beware the leaven of the Pharisees." And then they get this little confused look on their face, and they say, "Oh, shoot, we forgot to bring bread. That's why He's mad, you know." And Jesus is like, "No, it's not because of that. It's because you've got to beware of what the Pharisees are saying, because a little bit of untruth is going to affect the whole matter of dough." So then we get that weird exchange. And the reason why it's weird is because we get a little kind of cameo into the fact that the disciples still don't know what's going on. They still don't know who Jesus is. They still don't know what He's referring to. And there's still this lack of understanding about who He is. Who is this Jesus? And so chapter 16 is all about answering the question, who do people say that I am? Who is this Jesus? This week I was in my office, and I thought, it would be fun to get onto ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT, who do you think Jesus is? So I pulled up ChatGPT and I went to the bathroom. I came back and my screen was full, and the question that was in there was, why do I cry myself to sleep? I was very shocked, and ChatGPT said, well, this is serious. There's a list of numbers you can call, et cetera, et cetera. So I thought, well, I'm going to see how far this goes. And so I said, I didn't write this question. And ChatGPT says, it's okay. You don't need to be embarrassed. You know what I mean? Everyone has the thing. I am totally confused as to what is happening. And Vic walks in and he says, how'd you like my question? So now my algorithm is all messed up. I'm getting ads for therapy and all sorts of things are happening with that. Who do people say that Jesus is? Matthew 16, verse 13 to 26. When Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, He asked His disciples, who do people say that the Son of Man is? And they said, well, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, others say Jeremiah, one of the prophets. And He said to them, but who do you say that I am? Simon Peter, bless his heart, Simon Peter replied, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered him, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, Petros, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Then He strictly charged His disciples to tell no one that He was the Christ or the Messiah. And from that time, Jesus began to show His disciples that He must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. And Peter took Him aside and began to rebuke Him, saying, far be it from you, Lord, this shall never happen to you. But He turned and said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance, a stumbling block, a cause of offense to me, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man. Then Jesus told His disciples, if anyone is to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what shall a man give in return for his soul? This is the word of God. Trap questions are interesting. It's now the season where you're getting your electoral kind of packets in the mail, and there are debates going on. And one of my favorite trap questions is the yes-no. Only answer yes, no. And so the California kind of governor hopefuls were up there. Are you going to repeal the gas tax? Yes or no? And so they have a yes or no answer. I was thinking about a joke that someone said, do you still beat your wife, yes or no? How do you answer that? Because if you say, well, yes, then you still beat your wife. No, meaning you now have stopped beating your wife. Trap questions are a little difficult, right? I've said this before. How about the question, hey, what are you doing tomorrow? And you're like, well, nothing. Oh, great, you can help me move, And so often what happens with trap questions is we're trying to figure out what the person asking the question is after. And we have some interesting responses. One response is just the refusal to answer, So, gentlemen, if your wife says, do I look fat in this? You just go, you just refuse to answer. That's a tactic. A second tactic is to change the subject. Ask for more information. Why do you ask? The third one is the tentative waffle. Offering an opinion very guardedly so that if things go wrong, you can just switch around and come back to it, which is what the disciples are doing. Some say Jeremiah, some say Elijah, some say John the Baptist, which is the weirdest one because, like Vic reminded us, or Joey reminded us, John the Baptist was beheaded. So what is he, just like a reincarnation of John the Baptist? So you can give these answers. Today, it's kind of the check Google. It's like, well, let's see what everyone else thinks about this. Now, Jesus is leading them because he asks an interesting question. He says, firstly, the Son of Man, and then the Son of God. So theologians argue that the Son of God, Son of Man, which is a title given to the Messiah in the book of Daniel, is deliberately ambiguous enough and concealing and revealing that avoids distinct expectations of who the Messiah is. So Peter's confession will emerge as a divine revelation rather than assumption. In other words, if that was a little too wordy for you, the reality is this. Son of Man, Jesus says, who do people say the Son of Man is? And Peter responds with, you are the Son of God. Now, those things are different. And what we've understood, or what we will understand by the end of today, is that the revelation that Peter had about Jesus being the Son of God is what Jesus is trying to help people understand. I love Peter, the bold proclamation. I have a lot in common with Peter. We just exchange feet out of our mouths. He is forceful. He makes a confession of fact. This is not an opinion, but his answer is revelatory. He hasn't thought about it. He hasn't tried to figure it out. But it isn't because of his courage, his faith, his sincerity. It's certainly not because of his academic brilliance that he has come to this conclusion, because Jesus tells us that it is not flesh and blood that has helped him come to this revelation. It is a gift of grace. And he says to him, Simon, of the substance of Jonah, this has been revealed to you. I, Jesus, am of the substance of God the Father. And so we find out who we really are when we stand in a crowd and we make a declaration about who Jesus is. We find out who our friends are, we find out who our enemies are, and we find out who we really are when we answer the question, who do you say that I am? And this morning, we're going to find out that confessing Jesus as your King shapes who you become, how you live, and what your reward will be. The first thing we need to look at is, in order to understand who Jesus is, we've got a lot of clues, because Jesus says a lot of things about himself. What has he said about himself? That Jesus is the rock. But hang on, Nick. Didn't Jesus say that Peter is the rock? Verse 18, I tell you, Peter, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. But now later on, Jesus says in Matthew 21, haven't you read the scriptures? The stone that the builders have rejected has become the cornerstone. The Lord has done this, and it is amazing in our eyes. So this is where both Catholics and Protestants have partly got the answer right. This is not about apostolic succession and about Peter becoming the Pope. That is what Catholics understand this scripture to mean. This is about Jesus saying, Peter, the revelation that you have that I am the Christ, the Son of the living God, is the foundation on which everything rests. Not just the foundation of the earth, but everything in terms of creation and in terms of eternity, as Jacob showed us this morning. The revelation of Jesus as the Messiah and the revelation that Peter would have an important role to play in the founding of this brand new thing called the church is what we put together with regards to the rock. Now, what he's talking about here is a thing called primacy, not supremacy. And what he's saying to Peter is, you will have a primary role in the foundation of the church. He never talks about Peter's descendants. He never talks about the structure. And most importantly, I want you to understand this. Peter never refers to himself as the rock. He writes a number of letters to churches, and this is how he describes himself. Peter, an apostle. In other words, one of the apostles. Peter, a fellow elder. I'll tell you this. If I was Peter and Jesus had said to me, you are the rock, then I would title my letters. Hi guys, this is Nick, the rock. The walking on water rock. Just in case you forgot what I can do. And the reality is even Peter has understood that what Jesus is talking about is on this rock I will build my church is not talking about Peter becoming the first pope. It's talking about the reality of that revelation that when you understand that I am the cornerstone of everything, then you are able to walk into life with a sense of purpose and a sense of understanding what the church is for. I am the rock, Jesus says. I am the king. I am the Messiah that was promised through the law and the prophets. And as we've gone through the book of Matthew, we are able to see that. I am the desired of all nations. I am God. I have preached the good news to the poor. I have set the captives free. I've given sight to the blind. I've healed the brokenhearted. I have declared the acceptable year of the Lord. And we know that when he returns again, he will take vengeance on his enemies. And Jesus has modeled that I have power over nature, over the demonic, over Satan and death. And in John, Jesus says simply about himself, I am. Now, if Jesus is the rock and Jesus is the king, then he also says, but I must suffer and die. Now, this is a ludicrous thing for the disciples to understand. Now, when we look back on the prophecies, and we can identify some of those prophecies as what we call messianic prophecies, pointing to the suffering of the Messiah. But it did not enter the realm of possibility that the rescuer, the king, the Christ, the Messiah must suffer and die. This does not make any sense to them. But his suffering is a must, and his suffering must happen. And it's not happening because he's weak. It's not happening because Rome has so much power. It is happening because he has made that choice. On Good Friday, Vic reminded us that the reason that Jesus was on the cross is because he chose to be on that cross. And he reminded the people there that he had the power to step off that cross. So why must he suffer and die? I must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and be killed, and on the third day be raised. It's an imperative. Why? I think the first thing that we know is that he needs to satisfy the legal cost of your sin. Have you ever lent someone something? It's important to you, and it comes back broken. That's a bit of a weird exchange, right? So sometimes the person says, hey man, I'm so sorry, I broke this, and they just end there. And you're like, is there anything coming after that? Like, are you going to replace it? Are you sorry that you broke it? You know, maybe they're waiting for you to say, don't worry about it. It's okay. No big deal. And so it is a little bit awkward. They say, okay, don't worry, I'm going to pay for it. They want to pay off their debt so that their relationship can be reestablished with you. Yannick, I know this was important to you. I know I broke it. and I'm going to pay that debt. The amazing thing about what Jesus did is Jesus paid for something that he gave you that you messed up. And in the garden, what happened was union and oneness with God was something God gave Adam and Eve. And they messed it up. And now God in Jesus is coming saying, I am going to pay for that thing that you messed up. Not so that I can kind of have it over your head, but so that I can re-engage in intimate fellowship and relationship with you so that I can adopt you into my family. Now, the paying back of a debt is not just a cosmic legal transaction. It is that, but it isn't just that. In Colossians 2, verse 14, it says of Jesus that he destroyed the record of debt that we owed, which with its requirements that worked against us. He canceled it by nailing to the cross. We have to understand that true forgiveness always will bring pain to the forgiver. It's the one that is forgiving that is taking the cost of that. And so if someone has broken your thing and you say, don't worry about it, you are bearing the cost of that. The emotional cost of that, the financial cost of that. And Jesus' love for us is so high that he steps into this legal framework and says, I am going to pay this debt, which is why I need to suffer and die. And he's paying this debt not because of just a cosmic legal transaction. He's paying the debt so that he can show his love for us. Tim Keller says, we are groping for true love, incapable of giving it. What we need, what we must have, is someone who loves us but doesn't need us. Someone whose love is radical and unconditional. And the reality is this, is sometimes we overemphasize the kind of legal transaction of the debt, and we underemphasize the reality that that was done in order to bring us into intimate fellowship with God. What Jesus is saying about himself and this revelation of him as Christ as the Lord is the nature of the suffering and death I'm willing to endure is a picture of how deeply I love you. What else is he saying? He's saying that I want to restore the relationship that was lost in the garden, the purity, the love, the purpose, and joy. I want to cleanse and heal you from the stain of sin so that I can be with you and you can be with me. Jesus is saying, I am the king that must suffer and die because I need to satisfy the legal cost. I need to show my love, or I want to show my love, and I am establishing a new kingdom. And we've said this, the king and his kingdom. I'm not only a substitute, because every king rules a kingdom. And if Jesus is saying the kingdom of heaven is at hand, he's also saying, because every kingdom has a king, I am that king. My life is a model of the upside down kingdom. My death ensures that the penalty of sin is paid for. My resurrection eliminates the power of Satan, sin, and death, and I have established the already not yet kingdom. I'm not just offering you an entrance into heaven. I've empowered you to be kingdom bringers of light, of life, and truth together with me. I'm empowering you to be kingdom bringers of light and life. Not only is our debt canceled, not only are we brought into a place of deep love and affection, but we are also thrust into the world with purpose. And confessing Jesus as King shapes who we become and how we live. So how does it shape who we become? Well, let's look at Peter for a start. It took a long time to shape Peter. Peter tries to preempt the obvious connection. Jesus says, Peter, flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. And then he continues to talk about suffering, as I've covered. And Peter takes him aside, and he does the right thing. He takes him aside. He doesn't do it publicly. He takes him aside, and he says and he rebukes Jesus. He begins to scold him. This is like a parental term, like what you would do, what a father would do to their child, saying, "Far be it from you, Lord." In fact, the literal translation there is, "God be merciful to you." If God is merciful to you, then this will not happen to you. This shall never happen to you. But he turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance, a stumbling block, a cause of offense to me, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but the things of man." Now, that's a strong term. Rebuke is a strong term. Rebuke is what Jesus did when people had demons. Rebuke is necessary because this is the kingdom of darkness and the kingdom of light. This is truth and this is falsehood. This is the idea that we can have Jesus without the cross. And so, of course, Jesus is saying, this is not from the Father. This is from the enemy of your soul. This shall never happen to you, Peter says, in complete contrast to Jesus' words who says, I must do this. Peter says, no, this will never happen. So, I mean, why would he do this? Okay, he's not as idiotic as maybe you think he is. You know, he has a deep love for Jesus. There are good intentions here. He does not want his friend, his teacher, his leader to experience the kind of suffering that he's talking about. And this is our challenge in the context of community. Our good heart can prevent people from walking into what their destiny is in Jesus, because we don't want to see them hurt. We don't want to see them wounded. There's good intentions, but a good heart does not prevent us from making bad decisions. Peter has a very mixed motive. Part of it is kindness, part of it is concern, part of it is love, some of it is ambition, some of it is self-preservation. Because the reality is this: if they take our leader and they do to him what he says is going to happen to him, then what is going to happen to me? What is going to happen to us? And so, no. This must not happen to you. Translation: I don't want that to happen to me. So please don't let it happen to you, then it won't happen to me. I think sometimes what happens is we have both good intentions, mixed motives, and a not so hidden agenda. I would say that in my life, the way that I see this playing out is in my pastoral role. I'll see someone that is about to make an error in judgment. And I will say, please don't go in that direction because it will hurt you. It is against God's pattern for your life. It is not good witness. But then when I dig a little deeper, I also realize my mixed motive. And the mixed motive is like, and I'm going to have to clean this mess up. And so I know that I don't want this person to step into that. But I also know in my heart, I'm like, I don't want to do the work. I know what's going to happen if you make that decision. I've seen this movie 100 times. I know it's bad for you. But I'm like, I don't want to do the work. It's just going to be more work for me to clean up. I feel there's something of that in us when it comes to the way in which we engage with our friends and family, but also in Peter, there's this sense of like, okay, I don't want to experience this. There's also a not so hidden agenda here for Peter. The time of liberation is here. This man has fed thousands of people. He's exorcised a legion of demons. He's healed the blind. He has healed the lame, the deaf. He has totally befuddled and embarrassed the Pharisees. He's calmed the storm. He's walked on the water. He's done the impossible. Now is the time of Israel's redemption, and the destruction of Rome is very close. Now, even though flesh and blood had not revealed the reality, the revelation of who Jesus was, God had done that to Peter. Even though this was a massively formational time in Peter's life, we know that it didn't take root. How do we know that? We know that because he cut off the ear of the guy that was trying to come to Jesus. We know that because he denied Jesus. And last week, I spoke about the reality of this, is that we are being transformed from glory to glory, from faith to faith, and strength to strength, not immediately. And so these things begin to kind of stir in our hearts. We have good intentions, we have mixed motives, we have agendas about how we think Jesus should act in certain situations. God is a God of love. And the true revelation of God must therefore mean that he would never judge or condemn anybody. It's not necessarily our definition of God that needs to change, but maybe our definition of love. Karl Barth says this: take heed, theologians, and we're all theologians because we all have thoughts about God. Take heed, theologians, lest you force him, Jesus, into being a mere pet, or worse, an attack dog, trained to harm those whom you would like to dominate. God cannot be tamed. What is he saying here? Sometimes our mixed motives, our good intentions, our not so hidden agendas can turn God into a domesticated pet or a vicious attack God. Some of us think God is like this. He's kind and he's cuddly, and when I'm feeling alone and when I'm feeling depressed, I get to hold him, and he's not very dangerous, he's just very cute. And some of us think God is like this. Ready to pounce, ready to harm, ready to hurt. Now, there are good things in both of them. If I want a guard dog, I don't want the previous dog. I want this one, right? If my life is in danger, if I'm being attacked, I want this dog. But the reality is this, is that we struggle, and a lot of us struggle, with the multiple identities that Jesus has portrayed. Jesus calls himself brother. Jesus calls himself friend. Jesus also calls himself king. Jesus will return as a judge. And one of the things that we need to understand is the revelation that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, is a complete understanding of all of those things. And when we understand what our proclivity is, I like the little cuddly animal, then what we need to ask the Holy Spirit for is a revelation of some of the more attack dog characteristics. Or if we have that kind of idea, when we ask God, can you give me just a fuller revelation of what it means to be friend, to be brother, the kindness, the love of God. So how are we to live? Well, the bad news is Jesus tells us it's quite simple. We need to die. What does that mean? Jesus tells his disciples, if anyone is to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what shall a man give in return for his soul? It doesn't matter what you achieve. It doesn't matter how rich and powerful you become, or even how altruistic or noble your accomplishments are. The reality is, if it's not in him, if it's not for him, and if it's not through him, you will lose them. C.S. Lewis says, nothing in you that has not died will ever be raised from the dead. Look for yourself, and you will find in the long run only hatred, loneliness, despair, rage, ruin, and decay. But look for Christ, and you will find him, and with him, everything else thrown in. That is literally a paraphrase of what Jesus is saying. By Jesus defining himself and his mission by saying, I must go and die, and this is the reason that Peter is pushing back. If Jesus is defining his mission as one of losing his life, it automatically does what? It defines our mission, because we are followers, apprentices, disciples of Jesus. It is massively unlikely that his role is going to be different to ours. Peter has not lost his life. He's trying to find a way to make his life more meaningful, more fulfilled, and better. The inner circle, the Redeemer of Israel. It is possible to be Christ-centered without being cross-centered. It is possible. Because you cannot carry a cross privately. It's not something that is done privately. It's a very public event. And Peter had that opportunity around the fire. Aren't you one of those Galileans? No, I'm not. Weren't you with Jesus? No, I wasn't. Just because you can verbally articulate who Jesus is does not mean that we are behaving in a way that models his kingdom. Just because we say, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God, does not automatically translate into a change of behavior. And James tells the church that he's writing to you, says, you believe in God, so what? The demons believe and they tremble. Your belief in God is manifested through your behavior and how you act. So Peter sees Jesus correctly, but his responses are incorrect. And I'll be honest, it's both a warning to us and a comfort. To me, it's a real comfort. Because if Jesus says, you are Peter, and on this rock, both on the fact of who you are and the revelation, I will build my church, I am so grateful. Here is a deeply flawed man who takes 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and the reality of grace and mercy flooding his life. But, and this is the big but, church, there is progress in Peter's life. He does not remain the way that he was. And Paul says to Timothy, when he writes the letter to Timothy, let your progress be known to everyone, not your perfection. Let your progress be known to everyone. So what will our reward be? Jesus tells us, whoever saves his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? William Barclay, in his commentary on Matthew, says this: Jesus is not anti our life, but he is anti our preoccupation with our life. There is a subtle difference there. We are not pawns on the kingdom chessboard. We are not cogs in the kingdom machine. We are, as he said, friends, brothers and sisters, sons of the living God. That's what we are. But our preoccupation with our own lives is what is hurting us. And that's what Jesus is trying to help us understand. Jesus came to give me a new heart and therefore a new life, not to make this life better. Jesus came to give me a full and abundant life, and I cannot have that until I die to the life that I think is going to be full and abundant. That's why his death is necessary. That's why our death is necessary in the present and future tense. In Mark, Peter again approaches Jesus. And so he's wanting to make sure that Jesus understands the level of sacrifice that Peter is making for him. And so he says, see, we have left everything to follow you. And Jesus says, truly I say to you, there is no one who has left house or brothers or sisters or mother or father or children or lands for my sake and for the gospel, and that's the key thing here, for my sake and for the gospel, who will not receive 100-fold now in this time houses and brothers and sisters and mothers and children and lands with persecution and in the age to come. And Jesus is saying that if you orb your life around the first shall be last, around death to life, then you will receive in this life reward and persecution. But we don't like that. We just want reward. We don't want persecution. But the reality is sometimes our reward comes after a time of trial and persecution. And when we've sat there and we realized, oh God, if I'd not gone through this incredibly difficult moment, I would never have experienced you as the kind of healing and releasing God. Never. And so Jesus is saying, this is not a bait and switch. The reality is this, is when you change your understanding about what life is truly like, then you will understand that dying to self actually gives you an abundant life. Jesus is offering us freedom from guilt, from shame, from regret, freedom from anxiety, addiction, freedom from the approval of man, freedom from chasing vapor, whatever the thing is that is going to make us happy. That's what he's offering us. And he's offering us that now, not just a ticket to eternity. He's offering us now a life that is bursting with joy, with peace and purpose in the midst of troubled times and persecution. Why? Because he is with us. That's why we say, we delight, we display, we declare the uncommon mercies of God as a community. Band, you can come up. This morning, if you're a seeker, if you're curious, I just felt this morning as we were praying, I thought about the prodigal son, and many, many people know the story of the prodigal son. In fact, a lot of people that are not believers know the story of the prodigal son. But God dropped something in my heart this morning, the accidental prodigal. And the prodigal son in Luke goes to his father and demands his inheritance and takes his inheritance and goes away. And that's not what I feel is happening this morning. I feel there's like one or two people that are the accidental prodigal. That you've gone for a walk and you've wound up in a pigsty. You didn't intend to leave the father. It wasn't your intention. You didn't go grab the inheritance. I'm going to live my own life. But somehow you've landed up there. And you're embarrassed. And you're ashamed. And you're not sure how the Father is going to receive you. And Karen leaned over to me in worship. She said, I feel like people, as we sang the song, I'm running to the Father, people need a reminder that the Father ran to the Son. That when he saw him coming, he ran to the Son. Yes, we run to the Father, but man, we take one step towards Jesus, the Son of God, he runs toward us. And that's an invitation that's available for you if you've never accepted Jesus or if you are an accidental prodigal. Peter's name is Petra. My little niece's name is Petra. Sadie, her mom, asked me a question the last time they were here. She said, tell me why you believe what you believe. And I said to her, when I finally saw who Jesus was, I understood who Nick was. It's only in the understanding of who Jesus is that we come to a fully orbed understanding of who I am. And I said to her, once I understood who I was, then it kind of worked as a circle. Then I am a rescued son of the living God that has been given joy, peace, and purpose. If you're a seeker, I want to pray that the Spirit would reveal who Jesus is to you for the first time. If you're someone like Peter that has walked with Jesus for a long time, and maybe today you've realized you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. I'm tired of taking 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Or maybe you're holding on to your life because you don't believe that dying to self will lead to life. You don't believe that giving up will lead to abundance. If you're a believer this morning, I want to pray that you would ask the Spirit of God for a fresh revelation. Who is Jesus? Maybe you've turned God into this domesticated little fluffy poodle. Maybe you are just so afraid of him because he's this vicious attack dog. And maybe you have done that to others. Maybe you have taught others that God is a vicious attack dog or God is this little poodle. And maybe this morning there's an opportunity for fresh revelation. Maybe the Spirit is asking you, are you telling people what they want to hear? No. Don't do that. I know it's a harder choice, but that's not expected of you. Maybe we're telling people to take the easier path when they know that this is a path of obedience, like Jesus knew that that was a path. Am I helping people in my circle avoid the cross? And then in the context of community, am I actually helping people carry their cross? Am I saying, yeah, babe, it's hard. You have to carry your cross. I can help you carry that. But we can't get rid of that. This morning I want to land with a declaration, because that is what Peter made, a declaration. And the Nicene Creed was a creed that was adopted by the church back in 391 AD. This has been confessed for centuries, and this is an answer to who do people say that I am. But I've rewritten it within the context of Matthew 16. And so what I want to invite you to do is I want to invite you to stand. And I'm going to read the first portion, and then you guys are going to read where it starts, the next slide, to say, "But we confess." Who do people say that I am? Some say that you are one among many options in a crowded world of gods and legends. But we confess you are one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and of all things visible and invisible. Who do people say that I am? Some say you were a prophet, a teacher, a healer, kind, wise, powerful, but ultimately still just a human. But we confess Who do people say that I am? Some say you are an unknowable, transcendent, uninvolved spiritual force, untouched by suffering. But we confess Who do people say that I am? Some say you were a political activist, another victim of power, politics, and injustice, crushed by the decree of the state. But we confess Who do people say that I am? Some say the Spirit is nothing more than emotion, a projection of human longing and desire. But we confess Who do people say your church is? Some say the church is just a human institution, fractured, optional, impotent. But we confess you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Amen. Let's sing.